You can't go back. Lewis took the powder and shot out of his haversack and weighed them, then handed them to Corporal Brunner. Without a rifle, too? Are you crazy, Schneider? Too heavy, whispered Lewis. Need to travel light. The camp was sleeping, but for the pickets who kept watch. Lewis looked around, trying not to think of it as the last time he would see his friends. Those who were headed home tomorrow were probably dreaming of family and hot baths and tables full of food. He didn't have to guess what nightmares the others who were staying dreamed of. It's not worth it, Schneider. You go home tomorrow, Bruno told him. Stuart's still back there, Lewis said. He was my friend. I can't just... Stuart's dead, and you know it. Lewis considered that. He only took a ball to the leg. I saw it. I saw it, too. He's dead. The cool night air was sharp, and Lewis could see his breath hanging in front of him like some still image caught on tintype. In it, he felt the truth of the situation laid bare. If he's dead, I'll find my ball and be back before light. Lewis could feel Brunner's eyes on him in the dark. Is that what this is about? That baseball? I can't go back without it, Lewis told him. It's my lucky baseball. Besides, my pa would kill me. You go back there, and Johnny O'Reb will do the killing for him, if you're lucky, or be taken to some Confederate prison camp if you're not. They'd all heard the tales of the Southern prison camps. Compared to that, death did seem the better alternative. Lewis hefted his haversack to his shoulder just the same. Your family's going to be right sore you went and got yourself killed the night before you was heading home, especially over a baseball. How could Lewis make him understand? It was more than a baseball. Lewis's pa had given it to him when he left, with the order to bring it back in one piece. But they both knew he hadn't been talking about the baseball. His pa couldn't allow that Lewis might get blown to bits like Stewart or Kurlansky or Jones or any of the hundreds of other boys Lewis had seen get mustered out the hard way on the field of battle. In time, Lewis had begun to think of the ball as himself, or the ball as a part of him, maybe. He hadn't really tried to make sense of it. All he knew was that one way or another, both of them would end up back in Brooklyn one day, having a game with the boys at Pigtown. I'll be back before light, Lewis said again. He and Brunner shook hands, and Lewis tromped off through the forest the way they had come earlier that day. The picket post was more on guard tonight, but when they saw Lewis, they smiled. Ain't you got enough souvenirs already? One of the boys on duty whispered. The regulars were used to Lewis, slipping away to collect money from the dead graybacks, and he usually jawed with them on the way out. Tonight, Lewis gave them away, but passed by without a word. The moon was a sliver in the dark sky, which was good and bad. Good that it would be hard for anyone to spot him, bad that it was hard for Lewis to see anything himself. He found the road to Spotsylvania Court House and worked his way alongside it through the woods. Occasionally, he'd come to a cleared field and have to crouch along the roadside, trying to stay low and unseen. He reached instinctively to touch the baseball in his haversack, then remembered it wasn't there. Lewis got scared on the battlefield. No man he knew could say he didn't. But now he began to feel as Stuart must have, that there was always someone lurking around the next corner, behind the nearest bush, the closest tree, someone waiting to send a lead ball buzzing his way with his name on it. Poor Stuart had been right once, and once was all it took. A dark figure approached in the road ahead, and Lewis flattened himself in a ditch, feeling the cold, wet grass against his face. He wished for all his life he had his father's baseball back, or his rifle. He cursed himself for leaving it behind. The shape grew closer, and with his ears attuned to every little sound, Lewis heard a man's boots scraping along the hard dirt path. Thunk, scrape. Thunk, scrape. Something was off about the way he was walking, and Lewis dared to raise his head to take a look. The scraping stopped. "Who's there?" came a voice. Lewis buried his head again in the ditch and cursed silently. Be you grayback or bush hog, show yourself, varmint." Lewis slowly lifted himself and stood. Better to die on his feet than face down in a ditch. And in the dark, there was always a chance he might be able to run. Lewis squinted and tried to see the other man in the dark. He was only a shadow, but from his silhouette, Lewis could see he was leaning on a pole or a stick or a rifle. "Friend or foe?" the man asked. That depends on what color uniform you're wearing, Lewis said. Union blue, the man told him. Army of the Potomac, 1st New Jersey Brigade. I hail from just across the river, friend, Brooklyn 14th. Lewis stepped close enough so they could see each other in the dim light. Private First Class Louis Schneider, he said, shaking the man's hand. Corporal Giuseppe Silvestri. You coming from Spotsylvania? Lewis asked. He nodded. You coming from the camp? Am I close? About another mile, Lewis told him. He saw now the man had a leg wound, and he grimaced. It wasn't as bad as Stuart's, but the shirt he'd tied around it was already soaked with blood. You taking French leave, son? He meant, was Lewis running away? No, I'm headed back to Spotsylvania to check on a friend I left behind. Is it much farther? About another hour or so, best I can reckon. Not much to go back. For that didn't hobble away or get carried away, though. You run into any rebs from here to there? Lewis asked. No, you're the first ghost I've seen. Same here, Lewis said. Just keep down this road, then take the right junction at the forge. You'll come along the advance pickets, and they can get you into camp. Much obliged, Private. Lewis gave the man a quick salute, and they parted ways. He stayed on guard the rest of his walk, but if the corporal hadn't seen any Confederates ambling along at his cripple's pace, Lewis figured he wasn't likely to meet the Army of Northern Virginia on the way. In an hour or so, the terrain began to look familiar, and Lewis picked his way off the main road into the woods where he thought they had been encamped. He caught a whiff of gun smoke on the air, and he knew he was close. Soon he was upon the smoldering campfires of the day before, the roasted chicken and the baseball game distant memories now. It was late at night, or early the next day, and Lewis shook his head and blinked his eyes to keep himself alert. He started stepping over bodies before he ever reached the field. The soldiers, both Union and Confederate, lay face up, which meant the surgeons had been here. After a battle, the surgeons would roll in with their ambulances and stretchers and take some of the injured, but not all. Those that were only slightly wounded, like the corporal Lewis had met on the road, were left to make their own way back to camp or to a field hospital. Those with mortal wounds were left to die. In Lewis's late-night skulks back to battlefields, he had always made a point of waiting until well after the surgeons had finished their business. It was brighter out in the open of the field, though still dark, and men laid out all over the field looked like they were sleeping. Lewis knew better. He made his way quickly to where Stuart had been playing center field. He hoped not to find him, for that would mean the surgeons had gotten him and thought his wounds operable. But there he was, lying face up and staring at the moon with dead eyes. Lewis closed Stuart's eyes and said a short prayer over him, then cast around for his baseball. He found it lying a few yards away in the tall grass and returned with it to Stuart's side. I'll find your folks, Lewis whispered. I'll tell them how brave you were. Lewis looked at all the dark shapes around him. Somebody'll come and bury you. Somebody'll come and bury you all. No, wait, came a voice, making Lewis jump. A hand clutched his ankle. Gah! What the devil? At first he thought it was Stuart, come back from the dead to ask if Lewis heard something rustling in the woods, but then Lewis turned and saw another dark shape lying on the ground nearby, its dark arm snaking out to him, holding him so he couldn't get away. Don't bury me yet, the thing squawked. I ain't dead yet. Lewis tried to pull away, but the thing held on like a vapor. Get off, get off. Are you the angel of death? What? No, I'm... Lewis's eyes adjusted, and he could just make out the boy's gray uniform. He was a Confederate. He immediately thought of his gun, sitting against a tree miles away at the Union camp. His eyes searched the darkness for a bayonet, a rifle, anything he could use to defend himself. Please, the rebel said, I don't know what's happened. Why is it so dark and quiet? It's the middle of the night, Lewis said. That's what happens at night. It gets dark. Are you a medic? Can you take me back to my regiment? What? Take you back to your regiment? Couldn't the fool see Lewis was a Yankee? I'm not a... The rebel's head turned this way and that like he couldn't see a thing. It was dark, but not that dark. Lewis bent low and waved a hand in front of the soldier's face. He was blind as a bat, his face and eyes charred like the inside of a furnace. You're not a what? The Confederate asked. Are you still there? Of course I'm here, Lewis told him. You got hold of my leg. The rebel let go, and Lewis stepped back out of his reach, trying to think what to do. Sorry, it's so dark and my head hurts. Can you take me back to my regiment? Are they far gone? Lewis studied the rebel. He could see now he was around his own age, maybe even younger, and his gray Confederate uniform looked 3 sizes too big. His blind eyes searched the darkness eagerly, hoping for some shape or shadow that might give him his bearings. Lewis considered his options. He could leave the boy, which didn't seem right, or kill him, which might have been a mercy, but was out of the question. During the heat of battle, killing another man was one thing. It was kill or be killed, and both sides accepted that. Killing this boy here and now would be akin to murder, even if he might have been the one to take Stuart down in cold blood. An idea struck Lewis. Why not take him back to the Union camp as a prisoner of war? Maybe see if he could get a promotion out of it. Even on the eve of going home, a promotion would mean a better pension, which his family could sorely use. But without a weapon, how to convince the Reb to come with him? All right, on your feet, Lewis said. We're going to find your regiment. The boy was so profuse in his thanks, Lewis began to feel sorry for the lie. But there was no other choice. Try to find my pack, the boy said. It's just inside the wood line. It's the one with the baseball bat in it. Lewis paused. The what? The baseball bat. It's a white haversack with a handle sticking out. I left it near an oak tree. Lewis slipped away and found a white oak a few paces into the woods. Behind it was a haversack, just as the boy had said, and a bat handle sticking up out of the top. Lewis slid it out to have a look. It was the finest bat he had ever seen. Not a broom handle or a whittled-down tree limb, but a real, honest-to-God, lathe-turned hickory bat, such as Lewis had only ever seen in the hands of the finest players on the Excelsiors. The barrel was heavy and perfectly smooth, and the log handle had a knob at the end to keep it in the batter's hand as he swung. Lewis took a practice swing with it right there in the forest, enjoying the it made and the power it held. He brought the bat and the sack back to the boy, who was sitting up now. He had his hands in front of his eyes, but turned at the sound of Lewis's approach. I'm blind, ain't I? I think so, Lewis told him. The boy sobbed. My rifle, it exploded. I remember now. I never even got a shot off. My rifle blew up in my face. The next thing I knew I woke up here in the dark and I heard your voice. Are you a surgeon? No, they've come and gone. I just came back to find a friend of mine. Lewis's hand found the ball in his pocket. Where'd you get this bat? He asked. The boy was crying now. Not hard tears, soft ones like he'd just lost a friend. My pa, he's a carpenter. He makes them for some of the boys who play. I've never seen its equal, Lewis told him. He sat down in the grass next to the Reb. I was going to be mustered out tomorrow, the boy said through his tears. Go back to Louisville. Me too, Lewis said. Mustered out, I mean. Where are you from? Farther north, said Lewis. What, like Nashville? Lewis didn't have the faintest idea where Nashville was. Close to, he said. The boy dried his eyes, and Lewis clapped him on the shoulder. All right, then, on your feet. We've got a train to catch.